Good evening and welcome to Wisconsin's 44th Assembly District Debate with Democratic candidate Sue Conley and Republican candidate DuWayne Severson. I'm Mike O'Brien, serving as moderator for our discussion along with our trusted timekeeper, Janet Schultz. This event is hosted by Janesville's Westgate Corridor, a business development group serving the west and south sides of Janesville. We also want to thank Alan Luckett and friends at JATV, Channel 994, for televising tonight's forum. Among our research was the Citizens Guide into Participation in the Wisconsin State Legislature. Now, this document revealed that daily legislative sessions begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, a prayer, and announcements. So let's begin in that fashion. Janet has an American flag here for us. Begin with the pledge together now. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now I'll pray. Now, during this critical time in our nation's history, dear Lord, we pray for wisdom, courage, and peace in our community, in our country, and in our hearts. Amen. You know, on behalf of the Westgate Corridor and the citizens of Janesville, let me say how grateful we are to have really good, faithful local civil servants in the 44th representing the Democratic and Republican parties. Sue Conley and DuWayne Severson, thank you for your willingness to serve on an even larger platform in the State Assembly. For complete clarity, the 44th Assembly District, as I understand it, basically the footprint is defined by Janesville City proper. Would you concur, Sue and DuWayne? Yeah? Okay. Already we have a point of agreement. It's a good start. Allow me to review the structure for this debate. Each candidate has agreed to the rules in advance, although neither Sue nor DuWayne have received any questions in advance. The questions are based on community submissions from the Westgate Corridor organizers, including President Jim Damrow, and some input from me as well. We hope to cover the most relevant topics for the constituents of the 44th District. And if we've missed something, Sue and DuWayne can cover additional points in their closing statements. The order for speaking has been determined with a coin toss. The candidate that speaks first in the opening remarks will speak second in the closing remarks. After 2 minutes for opening statements by each candidate, there will be a question and rebuttal format based on a modification of the Lincoln-Douglas debate rules. As moderator, I'll ask a question with up to 2 minutes allowed for the first candidate to speak. Then the second candidate will have up to 2 minutes to address the same question. They may rebut or question the original candidate's position relative to the same topic. Then we'll proceed with the next question posed to the second candidate, followed by their opponent's response. This will be repeated throughout the up to 90-minute forum, leading to closing comments from each candidate. Our timekeeper, Janet Schultz, is ready, and after 90 seconds, she'll hold up a 30-second notice for each candidate. Thank you, Janet, to summarize their thoughts before the 2-minute deadline, and then she'll hold up a please stop sign to indicate that the 2 minutes are up. And I'll ask you both in advance and thank you both in advance for adhering to these fundamental rules. So let's proceed, beginning with the opening statement from each candidate. DuWayne, you've been drawn first. Please proceed with your opening statement.
Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Thank you for the Westgate Group for sponsoring this event. Thank you, Sue, for being willing to debate. And Janet, thank you for your hard work on keeping the time for us. We appreciate that. You know, Janesville, the 44th Assembly District, we need somebody now to go to Madison to get things done and not have endless study sessions. I've got a track record in 34 years in healthcare, 9 years on the Janesville School Board, 3 years on the City Council, and 5 years on the Police and Fire Commission of getting things done and not just having endless discussions. I've had the opportunity over the last several months to safely knock on over 5,000 doors throughout our district. And I've had the opportunity to talk with folks. One of the main things I keep hearing from individuals is this: what's going on with our state? What's going on with our nation? People are concerned about their safety and their security. I will always stand with our law enforcement, and I will ensure that they are fully funded to provide the safety we need in our communities. COVID-19 has had an impact on our jobs, our schools, our public health departments. I'll work to get those jobs back into Janesville. I'll work to provide the resources needed for our students, the parents who want to teach their students at home, and our teachers. And I want to make sure that our public health departments have more than adequate funding to provide correct, timely, and accurate decisions affecting our most vulnerable as well as our businesses. Thank you again for this opportunity, and I look forward to our debate tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, DuWayne. Now we'll proceed forward with you, Sue.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here as well. Thanks to the Westgate Corridor, JATV, and all those that have been involved in putting this together. I'm Sue Conley. I'm running for the State Assembly because I'm committed to Janesville. I have been serving the Janesville community my entire adult life, mostly through the nonprofit organizations. But I started my career in banking. And speaking to the Westgate Corridor folks reminds me of when I was the branch manager at Bank One on the east side, and we gathered the businesses together and had an East Side Business Association, which I organized and led for a few years. And it brings back very fond memories of working with folks in the business community. This was back in the 80s, actually. From there, I stayed home, raised 3 kids for a few years while they were young, and then I re-entered the workforce at the YWCA. I spent 10 years there. I spent 12 years as the executive director of the Community Foundation of Southern Wisconsin, which serves 9 counties in the state, and it really helped me develop community development skills and working with people to build consensus around solutions. I'm a great problem solver. I love to build consensus, and I love to hear ideas from everyone. So if I'm elected to the Assembly, I'll be trying to find the best ideas in our state, not ones that are just on one side of the aisle or the other. But I think we have to listen to everyone and come up with some common ground and some common sense solutions to the issues that affect our communities. And I promise to do that and to work really hard to help the citizens of Janesville. And I'll always put Janesville residents first in all the decisions that I make there. Thanks again for having me.
Great. Thank you both very much. This first question will allow you to expand on some of those points a little bit. We start with you, Sue. If those who know you were asked to describe your leadership style and abilities, what would they say?
I think they would say that I'm a good listener, that I really do value the perspectives of everyone and like to build consensus. It's just who I am as a person. I think we all have our own views on things based in our own life experience, and that's valuable. We think differently because we've led different lives, but we can come together and create solutions around our own life experiences. So I want to hear from everyone. As a leader, I don't try to be out front. I try to be part of the team and facilitate conversations so that we can actually get to good solutions. So I think that's what people would say most. And I like to have fun too. So it isn't all work and no play. I think we have to incorporate good humor and good relationship building to really create a solid team that gets things done. And that's what I'll do in Madison.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you very much. And DuWayne, what about you? Describe, what would others say about your leadership abilities if they were asked?
Sure. Thanks. I think what folks would say is this, I listen, I go to them, give me a quick example. As I've mentioned earlier, I've been able to knock on over 5,000 doors. And I've gone out to the people and listened to what their issues are, what their concerns are. I've gone to them rather than waiting for people to come to me. You got to take the initiative as a leader. You need to get out in front. You need to draw people out and get the information that they have and their issues and their concerns. I think that's what people would say about me. I think the other thing they would say is this: once I gather that information, working with the committee or board or whoever I'm with, then make a decision and get it done. I see that as a distinct difference between myself and my opponent. You know, we can have discussions and they're good, but I think at some point you have to move forward, you have to get things done. And I think my record is shown both in my public life and also my private life. But I've been able to get things done and get them done so it impacts and positively impacts the people that I'm working with.
Okay, thank you. Now the second question will start with you first, DuWayne.
Sure.
Name the 2 or 3 most critical issues facing residents of the 44th Assembly District, and how would you address those issues if elected to the Assembly?
Sure. I think one of the key things that we've seen here is the need to get jobs into our community. I think that has to be a focus by the legislature. We've seen an impact really with COVID-19. We've had an increase in our unemployment rate in the area. It's gone up from about 2.5% in the first part of the year. As everybody knows, it was in the high teens. The middle part of the year, it's back down to about 6.7% at this time. But we still need well-paying jobs in our community. I think we need to look for opportunities and look for ideas from other states and what they've done to draw businesses into their community. Let me give you one example. In the state of Texas, there's a really good program that they have. I'll use the acronym MIP, M-I-I-P, long and short. It provides a tax incentive for businesses that are involved in the video game, the movie industry, the filming industry, to locate in the state of Texas, to have their production facilities in the state of Texas. They get anywhere from a 5 to 22.5% reduction in their property taxes. So it's those type of views, things that we have to work towards. We need to look at other states. I know Iowa has a number of good opportunities as far as incentives to drive business in. We can drive businesses in our community. People will get the jobs. They'll buy the homes, bring the children, etc., buy the goods and services in our community. And with that, provide the tax base that we need to meet the goods and services that we have in our community, schools, our city services, as well as our county boards.
Very good. Thank you, DuWayne. And Sue, most critical issues.
Well, right now, I think the most critical issue is access to affordable health care. We know that it's difficult if you are unemployed and you've lost your health care to have access to affordable health care. I would like to see the state of Wisconsin expand Medicaid. The Journal of American Medical Association, in an article in July, said that economic and health devastation caused by the pandemic for low-income populations can be significantly mitigated in states that have expanded Medicaid. I think we need to look at that as a state. I think it'll come up during the budget sessions, actually. And not only does it help individuals get better coverage, but it also helps hospitals, because if people have no insurance and they're getting care in the hospitals, hospitals don't get paid. If they have Medicaid, they get some reimbursement for their services. And I think that's important, especially in some of our rural hospitals. The other thing that I think is really important right now is preventing homelessness. I'm concerned that when the eviction moratorium ends in the state, that we're going to have people out in the streets. It's going to be winter time. We need to do more to help them pay their rent, because the landlords need that rent money as well to maintain their properties. So preventing homelessness, to me, is one of those issues that we haven't talked a lot about recently, but it really does concern me. Last year, we had over 460 students in the Janesville School District who identified as homeless. That's too many. That's way too many, and we need to do more. We keep people in their homes. The rest of their lives go much easier. They're much more stable in their health care. Kids can study if they have a kitchen table to study in. They, gather as a family and have a meal in their home. They're just much more able to move about their lives. And so preventing homelessness is another issue that I really want to focus on.
Okay. Thank you both. Some of these topics will come up in other questions, so you can expand on those later. Sue, we're staying with you now for the next question. During this election cycle, local school districts are actively seeking approval of both capital and operational bond issues. Is this an indicator that the state funding formula for local school support needs to change? And if so, how would you change it?
I do believe that the funding formula for our schools is antiquated. Pieces of it have been frozen since the early 90s, and it's time for us to take a hard look at that. There are many pieces to funding the schools, and they're not all working equitably across our state. So I would like to study the issue, take it all apart, and put it back together again in a way that is more equitable for everyone across the state. One example is special education. The state mandates special education for students that need it, but they don't reimburse individual school districts for that cost. And I think that's important for us to do. If we're going to mandate something like that, we need to try to help pay for it as well. So there have been referendums all over the state for school districts who need help with just general operating costs. Clearly, we aren't living up to our former promise of 2/3 should come to the state to fund schools, and I think we should try to get back there.
Okay. Thank you, Sue. DuWayne.
I think we have had additional referendums for operations, and I think that formula needs to be looked at. I think one of the things we also need to do, not only in this issue, but really for everything that the state gets involved in, is just look at how we deliver those services. Obviously, just having this debate here, normally this would be an in-person operation. Well, we're doing it by Zoom. Other businesses have had to do the same thing. We have distant learning right now for our public schools. Even if and when a vaccine becomes available for COVID-19, there's still parents that are going to teach their children at home. The recent studies have indicated that the amount of individuals teaching their students at home has risen from 2 to anywhere from 8 to 10%. Well, that has a dramatic impact on what we need for our schools, both for the day-to-day operation, but also the brick and mortar. So we need to look at that. We need to look at everything within the state. How the services are being delivered in the state. I think one of the other things we need to come to the realization is are the things that we've done, the services that we've delivered within the state of Wisconsin, are they the best? We have an $80 billion budget. And I think it's hard for people to handle, to accept, especially during the impacts that family and businesses have had to adjust in COVID-19, that the state can also make those type of adjustments. I mean, even a 1% adjustment to the state budget amounts to at least $1 billion. Well, what kind of adjustment would that have on the rest of the budget and the services we provide? So, yeah, we could look at it. But I think the onus has to go back to the state. What are we doing? How are we delivering our services? And what's the most efficient way to get it done?
Great. Thank you very much, DuWayne. DuWayne, we're staying with you on this one.
Okay.
Should the state funding for local schools be further expanded to include equal funding for private schools, including parochial and charter schools? And if you're in favor of that approach to education, how would you fund that expansion?
Well, first and foremost, local control, parent control. Parents know what's best for their particular students, what learning model works best for them. So let the parent decide where their child should receive that education. Everybody's different. Some folks can do real well in a private, some can do well in a public, some can do well in a charter school. I believe we need to provide funding for the private schools through the state. We need to allow a parent, they're paying taxes, allow them to make those decisions what's best for their particular student. I think one thing that we need to keep in mind is this: even for homeschool, private school, there's an amount of money that still goes to the school districts, even if a child is homeschooled. It's not a total cutoff. I know that's an argument that the other side, continually brings up, and that's not true. There's still funding out there for the school districts. And again, we need to look at the models as to how we're delivering education. If we've got universities and colleges that are looking at distant learning, the schools, our public schools are going to be looking at it, as I mentioned earlier. I think we need to be open to those different models We know that even here in Janesville, we have distant learning through the Arise Academy. We got more students jumping into that option. So, let's look at the opportunities that we have to train our students. But I think we need to be flexible, and we need to give parents the resources they need to do what they think is best for their students.
Okay, thank you, DuWayne. Sue, your response.
Yeah, my response is that right now the state is funding parallel schools. We have public schools and we have private schools, and they're operating under different funding rules. I think that we need to take a look at the entire picture. Is it fair the way that we are funding private schools when the majority of those students might be of higher income families? The way that the fundings work isn't equitable right now. So if we think that the state should be funding portions of private schools or homeschool families, then let's take a look at the big picture and include all the different types of schools that we have, and then try to come up with an equitable formula. Right now, it's kind of hit and miss. We don't have a comprehensive funding formula for all the different types of schools that we have. I believe we need to take a look at the income levels of the districts, and that has to play a role in that, including private schools, including homeschools. So it's a complicated issue. I don't think there's an easy answer. I don't think it's a yes or no answer to this question. I think we want to do the best that we can for all the students of the state. We want to have a well-educated population, and we want to try to keep our students here in the state. And to do that, we need to take a look at the entire picture of funding for all of our students and try to do it the best way that we can. I think as far as looking at delivery of service, that really is up to each school district. I don't think the state should be mandating how the services are given to the students. I think school districts know what's best in that regard, and we need to allow for that in the funding as well.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Sue, we're staying with you on this one. Our local police and sheriff's departments have a good reputation. I think we can agree on that. But at the same time, our state and nation faces allegations of police brutality and institutional racism in many sectors. How would you address this issue as our representative in Madison?
Well, I think the Janesville Police Department has done an excellent job. For the last decade, we have been ahead of this curve thanks to our police chief, Dave Moore. He has created advisory committees. So there's an African American liaison advisory committee and a Latino liaison advisory committee that work within the cultures of those two groups to help educate the police department about the culture and to help be a source that can gain trust for our police department. I have seen that work very well, and I think that's a model that could be used throughout the state. We also provide our police officers with implicit bias training, use of force training, and I think there are a lot of things that we do here really well that we can help the rest of the state with. There are policies and great ideas from both sides around this issue that we haven't fully explored, and certainly we haven't come together to create legislature around it. But Kenosha has shown us that it's time for us to do that. It's time to share all the best practices that we can find around good policing, support our police department. Part of that might be to include in the budget sending out social workers instead of a police officer in certain circumstances. Here in Janesville, we know that if someone has a mental health problem, we can feed that to the police as they respond to that household so that they know better how to deal with that specific family and that specific person who might have behavioral health problems. So I think we're doing a great job here. I want to continue to see Janesville be strong, and I'm sure we will. But we have ideas that we can share with the rest of the state as well.
Okay, thank you, Sue. DuWayne, your response.
Mike, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure will. Our local police and sheriff's departments have a good reputation. At the same time, our state and nation faces allegations of police brutality and institutional racism in many sectors. How would you address this issue as our representative in Madison?
Okay, thanks so much. Mike, I want to go back first, though, really quickly on a comment that Sue made as far as higher income folks really only receiving the first school funding for private schools and the like. You know, the legislature in the past has tried to get that funding in the Milwaukee area, in the low income neighborhoods, in the low incomes, and that's been fought by the Democrats. So I just want to make sure that that's out there for clarity. As far as the whole police brutality issue, obviously, like in any business, when you find issues and individuals who are not complying with the rules and regulations, you need to take care of them. You need to remove those people right away. We do that in any business. We do that in law. We do that in healthcare. We do that in communications. I'm sure, Mike, in your business, when you were working, you know that those situations, you always find those individuals who are not complying. You know, when we find those situations, identify them and take care of them. I think one of the things we have to point out is that Speaker Voss in the last month has provided a task force for both the Republicans and Democrats in the Assembly to work together and also call in community members throughout the state that want to participate in the discussion and get things done. I think the key thing is this: let's have the discussion, let's identify the issues, but then let's get it done. Let's move forward. Again, we have to move past endless discussion on the issue, and let's get some resolution where we know that we need to get things taken care of.
Thank you. Our next question, DuWayne, coming back to you, is what should the state of Wisconsin do to mitigate the growing issue of home evictions?
Well, thank you. You know, there's a number of things I think we can work on. Let me give you an example of a model that I know that's in place in Iowa. There's a major tax credit for investors to go into opportunity zones and the like, offering up to a 10% tax credit for the production of low-income housing for those type of neighborhoods. I think those are the type of tax credits and incentives we need to look at throughout our state. Every community has those opportunity zones and those areas that we can go ahead and work towards to mitigate homelessness. I think, and home evictions. I think one of the things, though, again, as I mentioned before, we need to act decisively, and we need to act as soon as possible. You know, I know my opponent had, you know, she's mentioned that homelessness is a major issue for her, but I think we have to, you know, face the facts. In the last it took 6 months for the city of Janesville to just address one major issue concerning individuals being able to sleep in their cars. I was the only citizen member that attended that public hearing meeting outdoors in August. The one thing I heard from both the police chief and others was make a decision and let's get it done. I think the issue is, you know, I think the question that has to be out there is why did it take 6 months for this issue, and on average only one person that the police department identified was sleeping in their car in any of our parking lots? Why did it take 6 months? Leadership to get it done. Identify the issues, but then let's get a decision and let's move forward. I think that's the difference in myself versus my opponent.
Thank you, DuWayne. Sue, you have an opportunity to respond. How would we mitigate the growing issue of home evictions?
Well, I do want to say that it didn't take 6 months for us to find a location for the overnight parking, but overnight parking doesn't mitigate home evictions. We've been trying to find the best location for overnight parking, and you know, neighbors have something to say about that. And so when neighbors are upset and don't feel safe, the city council acted. I don't think we have not been decisive on that. But as far as evictions go, right now there is a moratorium on evictions that ends at the end of the year. Some of the things that I've been looking at include community land trusts. It creates a long-term solution for low-income housing, whereby the trust owns the land and then the homeowner owns the house. It provides an opportunity for them to, it keeps the cost of the house down so that they can afford the mortgage. And we know when people own their own homes, their wealth increases. So I think there are some interesting ideas out there. I know Madison has community land trusts. To my knowledge, Janesville does not. I have floated this idea currently at the CDA as a way for us to think about the future of preventing homelessness. If we can create opportunities for low-income households to actually own their own home. And the city has done this in other ways, but I think creating a community land trust is an idea that we haven't tried, that is worth exploring more, and perhaps we can put it together. I've talked with several folks from the nonprofit sector who are interested in working on that, so perhaps that's something that we can get done. But we need to find ways for people to actually own their own homes so they can stay in their own homes and prevent homelessness so they don't end up parking in a parking lot in the city of Janesville.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, Sue, has Wisconsin Economic Development Association been successful in its efforts to promote economic development in the state? And how would you change or improve their efforts?
The Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation has had its ups and downs, right? I mean, they have created loans that they shouldn't have made. I mean, there's been a lot of problems with that in the last several years. They do seem to be steadier of late. It's a difficult thing to bring jobs to communities, and Janesville works on that all the time. You have to have lots of different pieces in place. I think that the Wisconsin WDEC can perhaps provide more training to municipalities to help them understand what they might need to have in place, like TIF districts, for example. Planning for land use is an important thing. And perhaps there are ways that they can help communities be more prepared to draw new employers in and provide opportunities to create jobs. But that's a very complicated issue, and I think it's difficult for the state to actually create jobs. We have to create the environment in which people want to come to live and work and play. In Janesville, we've been working on that in our downtown, right? We want to be a community that draws people in so they want to live here. And if they want to live here, then people will want to have businesses here that employ the people who want to live here. So it's a complex issue that includes all kinds of things, not just jobs, but creating communities that are livable and workable and walkable, perhaps, and draw people into them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Sue. DuWayne, going to you on economic development.
Thank you, Mike. Just one clarity on the community land trusts. Hopefully, Sue, you've looked into that and realized in communities that have looked at that throughout the country. One of the major downfalls in that is what it is intended initially for the involvement of the residents. It ends up really transitioning more to an apartment or a condominium association where individuals are brought in, professionals are brought in to basically run things, and so those determinations as to how the housing will work gets eroded, and so that some of that buy-in is depleted. As far as the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, again, providing incentives as much as possible to bring businesses into our community, again, very important. I'm going to give you another example, which is, I think, things we need to look at. You have to have a toolbox, an entire toolbox of what a community we in the state can utilize to bring business in. You got to use different tools for different situations. In Arizona, for example, there's a tax incentive there for the development of bioscience business, bioscience engineering. Those types of things. Again, Iowa's got a number of different research and development credits, new employee, hiring a veteran, those type of programs to bring development into the communities. So I think we need to look at all of those. I think the key principle involved here, though, is we need to develop and have more in the toolbox for our communities to be able to draw more business in. We need to get people into our communities to stabilize our tax base for all of our good.
Thank you. Our next question, staying with you, DuWayne, is how would you fix the state shared revenue formula to ensure that it's fairly and equitably applied?
Well, Mike, going out the last two words that you've indicated, fair and equitable. It's kind of like for all of us, what's a good meal? What might be fair to me may not be fair to you, and what might be equitable to you may not be equitable to me. Look, we all understand that formula has been out there for an excessive amount of time. It probably does need to be changed. I'm going to go back to what I said before. We need to provide more opportunities for our communities to provide the revenue for what they need. I'm open to, again, looking at other states that have been able to provide the funds needed for their particular communities. But I'm going to go back to what I mentioned at the beginning of this discussion. We have an $80 billion budget. When I've asked other individuals in our community, what do you think about an $80 billion budget? Do you think the state can make some alterations as to how we get things done? Or are we assuming that everything that we're doing is the best? Are we doing the best we can do to provide the services that we need in the state of Wisconsin? I haven't found anybody yet that says yes. Again, I'm going to go back to where we're at. Today's reality is COVID-19's affected everything. It's affected businesses. It's affected individuals. I talked to a gentleman today who works in a small manufacturing organization here in Janesville. His organization is trying to make ends meet and may stay afloat. He knows of 2 or 3 others in the area that have gone under. Things have changed. We need to do things differently by just saying, you know what, we can look at the formula, but we got to look at how we're using the dollars and what are the services we're providing, and do we still need to provide them in the same way that we did before?
Thank you, DuWayne. Sue, we're going to you on state shared revenue.
State shared revenue is something I've been talking about throughout this campaign because it is not fair or equitable at the moment. That formula has been frozen since 2003. Janesville's been at the bottom of the heap. We don't look like we looked in 2003, right? The General Motors has been gone for a long time. That's built into the formula that they're still using to determine how much of the state shared revenue dollars Janesville gets. It's not fair or equitable. If we were at the average point of our peer cities, we'd be getting $5 million more a year. And we could really use that money for roads. There's a lot of things that we could do with that money. Firefighters need more equipment. So yes, state shared revenue needs to be examined. That formula is old and outdated. But also, if we were to do a referendum today for Janesville for something, we'd have to give that money back through the expenditure restraint program. There are so many pieces to the funding puzzle that come to municipalities through the state that are outdated, that need to be totally revised. So just like school funding, I want to take it all apart, look at every piece of it, put it back together in a way that makes sense for today's communities, because it is old and outdated. And it feels to me like the legislature hasn't met in 6 months. So it'll be interesting to see how Mr. Severson gets things done in a legislature that isn't willing to sit down and actually meet, even during a pandemic. So we do need to look at state shared revenue. I will be pushing that. They've told me in the past when I talked to legislators that it would create winners and losers. Well, my answer to that is Janesville has been a loser for far too long, and we need to make a change so that the residents of our community are treated fairly and equitably. And I'll push for that when I get there.
All right, Sue, we're staying with you on this one. One of the first tasks of the legislature will be to review redistricting proposals that will establish legislative district boundaries for the next 10 years. Proposals have emerged to guide the process, ranging from the Iowa model to an independent commission proposed by Governor Evers. What is the best way to ensure that the maps are fair and equitable and comply with state statutes and Constitution? And will you support the process?
I will support the process. I'm a huge supporter of fair maps. I do like the Iowa model. It's worked for Iowa since the mid-1980s. I like the governor's proposal to have a commission of Wisconsin residents come together, nonpartisan, to talk about fair maps, how to draw them. And I think they can use the Iowa model to guide their conversation. The Constitution says that the legislature needs to reapportion after the census. It doesn't say the legislators draw the maps. but they do approve them. And so, again, I'm one that wants to bring as many voices into the conversation as we can to create the solution that's right for Wisconsin. Clearly, the gerrymander districts that we have now are not right for Wisconsin. 55, I believe, counties in our state have either had referendums or county boards have passed resolutions supporting fair maps. Rock County had a referendum. 80% of the people who voted said, yes, we need a nonpartisan commission to draw the maps across the state. So clearly the public supports this idea. I support this idea and will continue to push for it. I don't think gerrymandered districts serve either party well. I think representatives should be voted in. I don't think they should choose their voters.
Thank you, Sue. DuWayne, redistricting.
Thank you, Mike. One thing, since Sue brought it up, I'm going to respond to it. Sue, thank you so much. You took one of my lines as to why I should be elected rather than the previous Democratic representative. You indicated that, Janesville's not represented far too long, and we've been a loser for too long. So thank you. I would agree with you on that. And I think in the last 8 years, that totally is a true statement. And as far as the legislature not meeting for the last 6 months, I think we just have to make sure on the record that, the legislative leaders did have the opportunity at least once to meet with the governor, but unfortunately those meetings were secretly recorded. So I think we need to just get that on the record. As far as redistricting, absolutely, I'm in favor of fair and equitable map as long as they follow the Constitution. The Constitution calls for the legislature to draw the maps. It doesn't call for at this time, it doesn't call for the governor to include people as he or she chooses to be included in the map drawing. Look, I want to follow the Constitution. I want to follow the state statutes. If people want to truly change it, change what the statutes say, change what the Constitution says, and go from there. The big question we have to ask in any of these situations is this: in what situations do we not follow the state statutes? And in what situations do we not follow the Constitution? Do we get to pick and choose those things we like and we don't like? What situation do we say, yeah, we'll follow this, and no, we won't follow that? Let's be consistent in it. Go through the process. If we want to change the Constitution, change a state statute, that's fine, but not pick and choose when it meets our particular needs.
Thank you, DuWayne. We're moving forward. You knew I'd get to the coronavirus. And DuWayne, we're starting with you on this. Governor Evers and legislative leadership have been at odds on most issues related to statewide response to the coronavirus. What advice would you provide to both sides of these issues to move forward in a constructive fashion?
Well, first and foremost, there needs to be consistent information coming from the governor's office. Let me give you a good example. Even in the last 7 to 8 days, we heard from the governor last Tuesday an order number 3 to reduce access to bars and restaurants by down to 25%. However, the order did not apply to schools, K-12 schools, and universities and colleges. The next day, the governor and his office came out and indicated that the reason for the increase in our hospitalizations was because of K-12 schools being open and for colleges and universities being opened up. But no, they're not restricted from being open. As I've mentioned before, we take the example of a college group of 75 individuals can meet in downtown Madison, have a discussion. They can move down to their local watering hole down on State Street. They go to the same square footage that they had in their lecture hall. Well, they can't meet there because you know what? The sign bar or restaurants there, they can only have about 18 people show up. The other thing we know is this: if I have a religious ceremony like a funeral or a religious wedding, the virus has determined not to attend those particular events. But if I do have a public wedding or a public funeral, the virus will attack those particular areas. I think what we've got to ask the question is, what particular science are we being asked to follow? Are we being asked to follow medical science or political science?
Thank you, DuWayne. Now we'll go to you, Sue. How would you guide this process?
I didn't hear DuWayne tell us how he was going to guide the process, but I have to back up just a minute because legislators didn't draw the last maps in redistricting. Attorneys and computers did. So if attorneys can draw the maps, I don't know why the people of the state wouldn't be allowed to have input into drawing those maps. As far as the virus is concerned, it's been very disappointing to me personally that we can't get the legislature and the governor to sit down and lead our state together. Obviously, it's all been very politicized, unfortunately. Wearing a mask, some people view you as a bad person because you wear one. You might be a bad person because you don't. As many people know, we had COVID in my house. I wear a mask wherever I go because I certainly don't want to be the person to spread the disease. So I'm careful. But I do think that the legislature should sit down with the governor and we should talk about what does our state need? What is important to try to mitigate the cause of this virus? Certainly opening schools up is important for a lot of reasons. I think mental health has to be a factor in determining what we do going forward. The virus is going to be with us for a long time, and mental health issues are creeping into every household, I think, because this is causing great stress. So shutting everything down probably is not the best solution. Opening everything up probably is not the best solution. We need to find common ground that is based in science, not politics, and we need to agree on a path forward because right now all we have is the constant back and forth between the two political parties. Everything about this has been politicized instead of talking about ways that we can take care of each other across the state that follow science and make sense. That's what I would try to do.
Okay. Thank you, Sue. This is an important topic, and we're going to stay with it. Sue, coming to you. During the pandemic, safety for our kids is a primary concern, but so is their academic, mental, and spiritual well-being. How should our local school districts address these challenges?
I think the Janesville School District had the right idea when they tried to allow every family to create the solution that worked best for them. So if you think it's best for you to stay home and your kids to attend virtually, then that was an option you got to choose. If you think it's best for your children to attend school in person, you got to choose that option. And others are doing a hybrid form. It's a family decision because families all come from different places and they have different mitigating factors, different risks involved. So I do like the fact that our school district tried to come up with a way that allowed families to make the decision themselves. I was amazed that they were able to do that. It seems very complicated and difficult to have all the right teachers in all the right places doing all the right things, both in the classroom and virtually. But somehow they've been able to do that. They have had to close a couple of schools because of outbreaks. I don't think that was surprising. This virus sneaks in. It's impossible to know how you contract it, where you contract it. Even people who believe they've done everything right end up with it. And so I agree that families should be able to make that decision. I think the state could probably help some school districts with resources in order to allow that to happen. Because one thing that makes it difficult is not everyone has internet access. And if you want to choose to do school virtually, you need internet access to do that. So broadband is important. It ties into our education system. We can certainly improve on that. But as I said, I think COVID's going to be with us for quite a long time, and we need to figure out how each family can be the best they can be with the resources they have.
Thank you, Sue. DuWayne, your follow-up on that.
Thank you. Well, Sue, I'm glad to hear that you've come around and you're agreeing with me as far as local control for families, local control for communities, kind of answering both this question we had now, but also the one before it. You know, let's the local control. What's good for a family? What do they think is best for their particular child in their particular setting? Same principle And I think that's the way it should be applied. The same principle needs to be applied in each and every community. What do the community public health, the educators, the businesses, what have they decided what's best for them? Let them decide it. I'm glad to hear that you agree that this is not a top-down approach, that it's not one or two individuals at the state making the determination for everybody, for every community, and for every school district, that it should be every community making those decisions, every family choosing what's best for them. You know, one of the things I think we need to keep in mind, there was a president a very long time ago that said, you know, the most thing we have to fear is, well, fear itself. I think we need to work through this, work together as a community. The one thing I also want to just, you know, I made a note here for future discussion. From what I'm hearing is that there was some concerns in using computers for redistricting. I'm not sure how the Democrats would go about doing that. I hope they would use some sort of modern technology in their determination of drawing the lines. But you know, yeah, we use attorneys, we use computers for everything in everyday life, and hopefully. You know, the Democrats will also, you know, be open to using computers and the like to get things done.
Well, we're staying with the topic for now on the pandemic, and the pandemic has exposed areas of vulnerability in services provided by local government health departments. What can the state do to address these weaknesses and help local government public health departments to be better able to respond to community health needs, DuWayne?
Federal, state, local, the funding for our public health departments has been eroded over time. That needs to be reestablished. That's not a Democrat issue. That's not a Republican issue. That's an issue that we need to fund. We need to get we need to get the dollars that they need so they can get the staffing and the information that they need to make appropriate decisions. Again, we saw that not only locally but throughout the state, where the lack of dollars, the lack of staff to be able to get timely and accurate information on how to treat COVID-19 for those who are most affected, how to what's the right approach for our businesses. You know, we need to have those disaster plans, as it were. We need to make sure that moving forward, we can sit and debate why it wasn't done over the last 60, 80, 100 years. But the reality is, moving forward, we need to, as a state, say you have to have disaster plans and try to anticipate as many issues as possible. But we need a more coordinated event. I know there were some attempts here locally to reopen Janesville and reopen Rock County. You know, in talking with some folks who served on those various committees, not a lot happened. You know, there wasn't an outcry. I don't see a lot of outcry outside of a few articles in the Gazette about our businesses being cut back to 25%. Just before this meeting tonight, I saw that the Wisconsin Bar Association, I believe, is suing the governor for the impact on their businesses. So, yeah, I think public health departments, we got to get the funding they need to make the right decisions and make them timely.
Thank you, DuWayne. Sue, let's go to you on that.
Will you repeat the question, please?
Sure. The current pandemic has exposed areas of vulnerability in services provided by local government health departments. What can the state do to address these weaknesses and help local government public health departments to be better able to respond to community health needs?
Yeah. So the city of Janesville has been fortunate to have a city manager who has set up an emergency operations management center, and they've been training since he's been here. I think our public health departments need to have similar training and practice so that when the next crisis arises, whether it's a natural disaster or a public health crisis, that they know what to do. They've rehearsed different scenarios. Every quarter, the City of Janesville team gets together and rehearses. They make up a scenario and they figure out how they would handle it. When this pandemic hit Wisconsin, the City of Janesville was prepared. Our public health department was not as prepared, and that's unfortunate. But I think there are ways that the state can provide guidance and training and the funding necessary to help them create similar situations where they get the training and then they continually practice so that when an event happens, at the drop of a hat, people know what to do. And in Janesville, they rotate positions throughout that emergency management center, and it worked very smoothly. So I was really proud of our Janesville community in that situation. And I think that other health departments, other counties should be able to have the guidelines and the resources they need to have the training and the practice in the same way.
Okay, thank you. Now we're staying with you, Sue, on this one, switching gears. Are you supportive of state restrictions on abortion in Wisconsin? If any, what changes would you make that affect the rights of the unborn or a woman's right to choose?
I believe that the decision for reproductive health belongs between the woman and her healthcare provider. I don't believe politicians have any right to that decision-making process. Every situation is unique. Every woman is unique. Every pregnancy is unique. And I don't think that changing laws to restrict abortions serve our population well. I really believe that the woman and her healthcare provider should have every opportunity to make the decision that's best for her. So I would not change the laws that we have in place now. Certainly, I think abortions are unfortunate, but sometimes they're necessary for the health of the woman, and it's not a decision that politicians should be making.
Thank you, Sue. DuWayne, going to you on the same question.
Sure. Thanks so much. Just for clarity for your listeners out there, when I was on the city council, I was part of that group that brought in Mark Freitag with his expertise in working in the military for emergency type situations. That's one of the reasons we brought Mark in. And when I was president of the Janesville Police and Fire Commission, one of the reasons we chose Chief Rhodes was his extensive experience in working with FEMA and the like, was involved with 9/11 and also a number of hurricanes. As far as restrictions on abortion, let me address a couple of things that Sue's indicated. The USA Today had come out in the last year or so, and they clearly documented that only 2% of abortions are because of rape or incest. 98% of the abortions, this is on the USA Today has indicated that 98% of all abortions are for convenience. I picked up, Sue, also that you kind of changed the question, which was abortion, and changed it to reproductive health. There's a difference. The reproduction has already started once we get to that abortion phase. Again, we're looking at aborting an individual at any point. If we were to take it to the extent that some states have, which is up to the point of and even directly after a child is born, I think when a nation allows that to happen, there are consequences. I think the key thing is this: the child didn't cause the issue. That is a child, and I'll always defend the child.
Thank you, DuWayne. DuWayne, we're staying with you on the next question. Wisconsin is a great state for hunting, yet every day we hear news around our state and nation of more outbreaks of violence with the wrong use of a gun. Are you supportive of stiffer gun laws, or would you advocate for other solutions?
Well, Mike, excellent question. I look to really just south of us in the state of Illinois. If we look at Chicago has some of the toughest gun control laws in our entire country. But Chicago has twice as many murders this year as they did last year. So, again, using the science as we've been asked to do, where's the science in more restrictive gun laws? I think it comes down to personal responsibility. And we have to ask the question also, is it death that we want to prevent? Or is it control over an individual? If it's death, then we need to remove all the cars off of our highways tomorrow, because I've got a 3.5 times more chance of getting killed in an automobile accident than I do with a gun. So the question's got to be asked, what's the real intent? Where's the real model of where extra gun control works? You know, we've got 80,000 guns that are registered by individuals in the state of Wisconsin. Those people are very diligent. They take gun safety classes. It's coming up to November. People go on the family deer hunts. They're very careful. Do accidents happen? Absolutely. But I go back to my question that I've asked before. Is the issue the reduction in death, or is the issue the seizing of control? If I have a 3.5 times more chance of getting killed in an automobile accident and going to a rally against gun control, which one is it? That's really the question on the table.
Thank you, DuWayne. Sue, going to you on gun control.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm distracted by the driving the car to a gun rally. I don't believe that any citizen needs to own a weapon of war. I believe in the Second Amendment. I grew up in a household that is full of deer hunters, sportsmen, and certainly guns are a sense of enjoyment to some people. I have friends who like to target shoot. I don't see anything wrong with that. But AR-15s, AR-47s, I don't understand why an individual feels the need to own that type of weapon. You can't use it as a sportsman. You know, those weapons were created to kill people, and they do that very efficiently. I would ban those. I don't see a need to have those out in the hands of citizens. There's no real purpose for that. So do I want to control everything everyone does with a gun? No. But I would take away the weapons that were created for war. The only purpose that they have is to kill people. I would take those away from folks. I don't see a need for us to have those on the streets.
Thank you, Sue. We're staying with you on this. Many people believe that Wisconsin has some of the most lenient drunk driving laws in the country. Do you believe that the state should take additional remedial actions to toughen our laws and get drunk drivers off the road?
Yeah, our culture here is very beer-centric in a lot of ways. We do like our beer here. But I do believe that we should strengthen our drunk driving laws. You know, we don't take it as seriously as people do in other states. I know for example, Wyoming, you know, you get caught once and you're in jail. It's not a minor offense. It's serious business. And I think that makes a difference. So I would look at that and try to strengthen and put higher penalties on drunken driving, because we know that it costs lives, innocent lives, all the time here in Wisconsin. I do think that deserves it. I know that the Tavern League is very much against that, and they have lobbied against strengthening those laws, but I think it makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Sue.
DuWayne, your response to that.
Sure, thank you. I want to go back on the thing, though, is on the guns really quickly. Sue, I thank you for going on the record and indicating that you're willing to take away people's guns, and that you stated that you're not standing up. You don't want to stand people for the Second Amendment. The reason you made a statement of weapon of war, I'm not sure where where does the line get drawn? Where does that stop? The reason why should we have that? And my simple answer is, it's the Second Amendment. That's the reason why. Going on to the drunk driving laws, yeah, I think we need to look at that. I think the Mothers Against Drunk Driving have done an excellent job to identify impaired drivers on our road. I think, though, we need to be consistent. If we want to take impaired drivers off the road, I know my opponent has indicated earlier, she's okay about approving and legalizing marijuana. Well, that's an impaired driver. And I know the American Psychiatric Association is concerned for a number of reasons for the legalization of marijuana, one of which is impairment. So we're talking about, and rightfully so, the removal of individuals who have these consistent drunk driving violations. But we're looking at possibly adding another category of impaired drivers on the road. through legalization of marijuana. I think we need to be consistent if we're going to do this. It's really hard to sell what you're trying to do by saying, well, we want to take drunk drivers off the road, but marijuana impairment, because we know people will say, well, I'm only going to have 1 or 2 drinks. I'm only going to have, well, I think you know where I'm going on that. We're going to have a new level of impairment on our roads, and we're going to have, unfortunately, new groups, Mothers Against Impaired Driving, marijuana driving, if we allow this.
DuWayne, you're stepping into the next question, and we'll stay with you on this, that regarding marijuana use. In Wisconsin, people driving under the influence make our roads a dangerous place. Now Illinois has legalized use of marijuana for recreational purposes. Some pressure to legalize marijuana has also been discussed in Madison. Where do you stand on the issue and why?
Well, again, for the record, no, I did not know that you're going to answer that question right after this one. So thank you, Michael. Where do I stand on it? Did you mention, Michael, I want to make sure, you did mention something about Illinois?
I did, yes.
Yeah. My first and foremost thought, and I think most people in Wisconsin would say this, I don't want to get a whole lot of guidance and direction from the state of Illinois. Outside of maybe some baseball or football, if you're into that, or maybe hockey. But outside of that, I don't think there's a lot of guidance and direction we should take from the state of Illinois. Let's face it, it's a bankrupt state, literally a bankrupt state. To take advantage of individuals by just selling marijuana, saying, well, it might fill a budget shortfall. But what are the costs? What are the costs, as I've just mentioned? What are the costs? What are the emotional costs that will be inflicted by now a new drug entering our communities? What's the impact on additional mental health, behavioral health services? Well, again, I go back to the American Psychiatric Association. They came out in August of last year. They're against the legalization of marijuana. Why? They're concerned about the impact on youth and the addictions that may be caused by the legalization of marijuana. So again, if we go by what the state governor and the like have said, go with the science, follow what the science says. Well, the science, the people in the medical profession have said, we're against it. We're concerned about the legalization of marijuana. Then I think we need to listen, and we need to listen very hard. For medical purposes, I'm open to that discussion. That discussion's got to be between a doctor and their patient. But as far as recreational use, I think there's a lot of questions out there that still have to be answered.
Thank you, DuWayne. Sue, your response regarding the legalization of marijuana.
Well, we definitely have impaired drivers on our roads all the time, and if we legalize marijuana, we would take care of that as well. I think that marijuana is a drug that has been overly criminalized, and it's time to put an end to that. There are several states across the country that have legalized marijuana. We can look to them to see what's worked well, what hasn't. I think regulating it brings in more tax dollars that can be used. And I think it makes sense. If we're going to be surrounded by it, people in our state are going to be using it. They already are. People use marijuana all the time. So I prefer to make it legal and to regulate it and to figure out how we can determine if someone is an impaired driver using marijuana. We certainly figured that out with alcohol. I'm sure we can figure it out with marijuana as well. If you're worried about impaired drivers, then we better just eliminate alcohol all across the state. Then you won't have to worry about that at all either, right? Because people won't drink if it's illegal. I don't know. It goes back to, again, personal responsibility. I think marijuana is a drug that can be used responsibly by reasonable people, just like alcohol can be. And I don't see a reason to make it a criminal offense to use marijuana.
Thank you, Sue. Moving forward, how would you propose addressing the financial needs of local governments to fund roadway maintenance and construction in their jurisdiction?
So the city of Janesville is currently exploring creating a transportation utility, which really puts the burden of road maintenance on the people using the roads. It shifts some of the burden from the property owner, the homeowner, to business community, and it creates a method whereby we wouldn't have to borrow as much money. So long term, in the end, it would cost us less to raise money through the transportation utility. I think for local control, I'm glad the city of Janesville is taking a look at that. I think it can make a lot of sense. We can't keep borrowing. Every year we try to do 12 miles of road maintenance, and every year it goes up by about 8%. That's unsustainable if we continue to borrow year after year after year. So I'm excited about the transportation utility idea, and I look forward to having study sessions, DuWayne, because we need to learn more about it in a forum where everyone has input. So there will be study sessions coming up in January and February around transportation utilities for the city of Janesville, and I look forward to learning more and making a determination about whether or not that in fact is the right thing for our community.
Thank you, Sue. DuWayne, we're on roadway maintenance and construction. Your response.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go back to the marijuana issue real quick. I'm very glad that I don't live in a neighboring state near Nevada. If we follow the direction from my opponent, we may have other businesses and things that aren't allowed in other states to be just follow the crowd. I think that's it's another distinction between my opponent and myself. There's one thing about following the crowd because everybody else is doing it, and being able to look at an issue and evaluate all the positives as well as the negatives. So again, I'm glad I'm not in Arizona. As far as addressing the roadways, yeah, and I'm glad to hear that there's going to be input discussions starting in January. My only hope is that it'll go much quicker than some of the homeless issues that took a while here in our city. My opponent's also brought up the fact that she's open to the gas tax and indexing the gas tax. I'm surprised you didn't mention it this time. One of the things we need to keep in mind, if we were to look at increasing and indexing the gas tax, the vast majority of the people, from what Sue's mentioned in the past in a couple of situations, the vast majority of the people are people in the state of Wisconsin. They're going to pay for that. Those are the individuals that are going to pay for it. Okay. Our industry, as far as our tourism for the next couple of years, unfortunately, as an example for Tommy Bartlett, out of business. We've got hotels and restaurants cut back severely. That revenue from those folks is going to go away. Am I open to a discussion of a transportation utility fund? Yeah, I'm open to that. I think the other thing I'm going to keep in mind is this. We got an $8 billion budget. A 1% reduction, if we were to take just a 1% reduction across the board, we'd add almost 6.5% to the transportation utility fund in our state. It would have a dramatic impact, and the need to have indexed increases on our gas would not be even needed, and the transportation utility fund impact, thank you for the stop sign, would be minimal. Thank you.
We're staying with you, and we'll talk about money a little bit more. Recently, interjurisdictional shared services agreements have been emerging in such areas as fire and paramedic services. Do you believe that there are other areas where local governments would benefit from shared services? And if so, what would they be?
One of the reasons, again, we brought on, when I was president of the Janesville Police and Fire Commission, and when we did our interviews with our 5 candidates, we chose Chief Rhodes because he had that experience in other situations that he was in. So he was familiar with both the issues nationally, what was happening in communities, but how to do that in an effective and effective way. So again, I'm glad that we brought on Chief Rhodes. When I was in the Janesville School Board, one of the things I did was bring in the other school districts for some discussions, for some opportunities to share services amongst our school districts. So I'm open to that. I think we can work together on that. I think, again, what are the services that are being delivered? Do they still need to be delivered in the same sort of way? How can we do them differently? I think those discussions can be had between our various communities, and I think we can get real positive results. Again, we've got communities that are having impact on their tax base, so we need to look at those some new ideas for that.
Thank you, DuWayne. Sue, shared services agreements.
Well, we have some shared services agreements right now, especially within the fire department between Janesville and Milton. There is some discussion about creating a fire district that might have taxing authority. So that would be an interesting conversation as well, because that would kind of shake up how the city of Janesville specifically is funded. Right now, tax dollars pay for our fire department, as well as state shared revenues. But if it had its own taxing authority, that would shake things up a bit, and it would be interesting to see how that might play out. I think it always makes sense to look at shared services because it's a way to be more efficient and effective using tax dollars to the best of our ability. So I'm always open to looking at that. I do want to just jump back, though, to following along with what other states do. Mr. Severson, you've talked a lot about Iowa and Arizona and other states and what they're doing. I think we should look at other states, not to follow what they're doing, but to find out what the best practices are and employ those in the state of Wisconsin. We can also see perhaps things that didn't work out so well, so we know what to avoid. It's not a matter of following what others do. It's a matter of learning from their experience and incorporating that into our own. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Sue. Sue, we're staying with you on this next question. The Janesville City Council has spent a lot of energy on human services issues like homelessness and bullying. What do you propose should be done and by whom to successfully mitigate these matters in the 44th Assembly District?
Well, bullying is something that is very difficult to get your arms around. It's a struggle. Homelessness is something that we also struggle with because, number one, I think the thing that we need to do is pay people more. You know, if people earned a livable wage, perhaps they wouldn't become homeless if they could pay the rent and buy the food and pay for the heat, which is coming soon. So I think that's one thing. And the city of Janesville, when we work on tax incremental financing deals, employment is one of those things that we look at, and we try to get the new employer to realize that the wage that they're going to pay is important to our city. So I think that is one tool that the city can use to try to help with wages. We need to increase wages. The other thing, as I said, there are lots of different ways of creating housing to prevent homelessness. We need to help people have home ownership. It makes a big difference in their lives. Community land trust is just one idea. The city of Janesville is building now an affordable housing project, which is another idea that did get state tax credits to put that up. So we need to make those available through WIDA whenever we can through the state, because housing is critical. If you don't have solid housing, you don't have much else. And I think it should be a high priority in our state to try to come up with incentives and ways to create housing that is affordable to people who are in our lower income brackets.
Okay, thank you, Sue. DuWayne, your response.
Thank you. As far as, let me go to the second item first. You know, one of the things, and I would invite people to go to my website, I had a great opportunity to interview the Vice President of Bia Rooney to talk about the services that they provide here in the city for individuals, kids who are being bullied, and for their parents to provide the support that they need. So, you know, it's a great organization. They do a great job helping kids out, working with the schools, working with the police department and others to really meet those needs. So again, I'd encourage people to go to my Facebook page. You'll see, you know, the interview I had with those folks about a month ago. As far as the homelessness altogether, you know, I think we got to ask the question, why are they homeless? Get the individuals the services that they might need, you know, to address that. We've got great organizations, you know, the coordinated effort with the Gifts Men's Shelter, you know, non-government input. You know, they do a great job with all of the churches. They help out. So we've got folks in the community that can address that. You know, I'll agree with Sue on this one. Do I think people need to make more money? That'd be great. I think, though, we got to go back to the source, rather than just saying, well, they need to make more money. How do they make more money? Well, they make more money. We need to attract those businesses in our communities, higher paying jobs into our communities. Give those incentives to the businesses to locate in Janesville and other communities, high paying jobs, so that we can provide a higher standard of living for all of our employees, so that they can go out and purchase homes, provide for their families. So, you know, it's more extensive.
Thank you, DuWayne.
Yep.
DuWayne, we're staying with you, and we have time for one more question, and then we'll go to closing statements. The time has passed quickly. If effort is an indicator of your conviction to serve the constituents in the 44th District, how would you describe this campaign journey, and how might that effort translate to results for voters?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, Mike, one of the blessings that I've had is getting out and meeting people throughout our city. I think you learn something when you go to them, when you see them safely, but going to ask their issues, finding out what their concerns are, what's affected them, what do they want to see changed. Talk to people where they're at rather than waiting for individuals to come to you. I think that's, as far as the journey, I've enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to serving people in our district. You know, there's a lot of wisdom and insight for the people in our community. And so that's what I'm looking forward to in serving our community.
Thank you, DuWayne. Sue, and regarding your journey.
My journey in this campaign has been incredibly interesting, and I too have enjoyed talking with a lot of people. Unfortunately, I was quarantined here in my house for 7 straight weeks this summer. So a lot of my campaigning has been on the phone and through the computer until recently. It is fun to go out and talk to people. I do wish that we had community events going on, that we could mix and mingle and see folks in groups, but that's not possible. So I really appreciate forums like this where we're able to come together and share our views about the state and the legislature. So I appreciate this very much. I too have enjoyed conversations I've had with lots of people, and I don't know, I love our community. It's fun just to be amongst the people of our community, hear what their issues are, what they love about their community, because that's a really fun part of the conversation as well, is you get to hear why they love Janesville and why they want it to succeed. And so I really enjoyed the journey as well. 3 weeks to go, and then we'll have our answer. So thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Great. Thank you. So now we're staying with you. You get to lead with the closing statement, again, up to 2 minutes, and then we'll follow with DuWayne. So Sue, would you share with us your closing statement?
I will. Thank you very much again for the opportunity to be here. This has been an interesting evening. Some of my words have been twisted a little bit, but I think the people of Janesville know who I am and what I stand for and why. I've been serving our community my entire adult life. I love the nonprofit community. Actually, DuWayne and I served together at United Way many years ago, and we both have been very active in the community. And I think that's an important piece of why we both want to serve you going forward. It's a commitment that I feel to the community. I've enjoyed serving on the city council and problem solving, not only as a council, but we get tapped by individuals all the time with things that they need help with. And that has been one of the most rewarding pieces of serving on the city council, is helping people with issues that they're facing. And I want to continue to do that for the folks of the 44th District in the State Assembly. And I know that I can do a good job. I'll always put the needs and the interests of Janesville first. So I hope you'll vote for me on November 3rd or before. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. DuWayne, going to you, closing statements, please.
Thank you so much again to the Westgate Corridor group. Thank you again, Sue, for this opportunity to debate. From Mike for jumping in here and doing the moderating. And Janet, thank you for the timekeeping. I think I kept it in there within the time frame. So thank you for that. This is a great opportunity for folks to, get the information, make their decisions based upon what we've shared tonight. I want to be the servant for people in our community. I'm not running for this position to just add it to my social resume. I'm going to be the servant. I want to work for people in the legislature starting in January in Madison. I'll continue to stand for our law enforcement to make sure that they get the support they need at all time. I also appreciated this opportunity to, I'll call it, clarify the statements that others have made. So I appreciate that opportunity. Long and short, thank you so much for listening tonight. Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to serving you. and I need your vote on November 3rd. Thank you so much.
Thank you, DuWayne. Thank you, Sue. This concludes the 44th Assembly District debate with Democratic candidate Sue Conley and Republican candidate DuWayne Severson. I'm Mike O'Brien with my timekeeper, Janet Schultz, and we hope that this forum has aided in your discernment process and that you will vote on November 3rd or perhaps sooner with a mail-in ballot. Thanks to Westgate Corridor for hosting and JATV for televising tonight's event. And thank you for participating in the election process. Stay well, may your days be many and your troubles be few. Good night.